Welcome, everybody, to another episode of IGN Unfiltered, my monthly interview series where I get to sit down with the best, brightest, most interesting minds in the games industry. My guest this month is Phil Harrison. He is currently the Vice President and General Manager at Google on Google Stadia. So we're going to talk all about their streaming gaming service that's launching right now. But Phil was also an executive for a long time at PlayStation and then at Microsoft for a bit too. So lots to talk to him about. Enjoy.
Have you always been a gamer, or did you find that your path into the games industry was an unexpected one? I'm always curious.
It was an unexpected career for sure, but yes, I've always been a game player and a game maker. I started with an accidental Christmas gift one holiday with a Commodore 64.
Nice.
Which had that incredible moment where you switched it on and it just said ready and there was a blinking cursor. And that was just an invitation to go do something amazing.
Yeah.
And what really got me excited was graphics. How I could have something in my head that I could then, with a few pixels, then turn into a story or a character. I think there's a number of sort of seminal moments that I remember. I think going round to a friend's house and seeing an Atari 2600 for the first time. Even before that, what was the predecessor to the Intellivision and Pong. I loved a lot of the LucasArts games early on. I love some of the early Activision games, Little Computer People Discovery Kit. I don't know if you remember that.
That one is not familiar to me.
Oh, you should check it out. It was like a kind of visually rich Tamagotchi, where you had a character that you had to look after, you had to feed it, you had to kind of play with it and interact with it. And if he got bored, or she, actually I can't remember the gender, but if they got bored, they would lean forward as if they were on the inside of your computer monitor and knock on the inside of the glass.
Good.
And there was this really amazing sound effect, which you probably won't be able to pick up, but it just, it was just perfect. And I was like, that was great game design. So those kind of moments. And then from there, I managed to turn it into a little bit of a job on the side when I was early teens, doing graphics for friends who were making games. My first published work was on a computer called the Oric 1, which absolutely nobody will ever have heard of.
I cannot say I have, I'm afraid.
Imagine an 8-bit computer with all the smart bits of a Commodore 64 taken away.
Oh.
So that was basically how it worked. I got paid £50, I think, for the graphics that I did, aged 14, and I thought,
wow,
this is the future.
Yeah, did that just like crystallize it and make it real for you at that point?
I think I was too young to think of it in terms of a career arc, and I had no idea what kind of an industry I was getting myself into. But the idea of being a freelancer and being able to work on other people's games as a graphic artist, and then as a game designer, and then eventually as a producer, was just thrilling. I loved it. And so I decided to take a risk, and I left school when I was 16.
Wow. Were your parents thrilled about that?
Oh, they were absolutely delighted, as you can imagine.
Yes.
And I'm not that far away from potentially the same conversation with my own kids. And so I can imagine that.
You don't have a leg to stand on in that conversation.
I've never told them this story. So
don't watch this. Turn it off.
When they come to watch this, I am completely screwed. But no, it was just a moment in my life when I realized I had an opportunity and I wanted to do it. And I kind of did a deal with them, which was, if it doesn't work out in a year, I'll go back and finish school. And then I wound the clock forward a few years, and I was living here in San Francisco, and I was an executive at PlayStation, and I flew them out for a vacation. And I sat them down over dinner, and I said, do you remember that deal that I did you a few years ago? Are we kind of square?
Are we good?
Are we good on this? And it was a fun moment. Now, I wrote a letter to the guy who ran Mindscape in the UK.
Yeah.
And said, hey, I'm a game designer. Would you like to see my portfolio? And he invited me down. They were in a beautiful location in the countryside south of London. And I sat with him for half an hour, and I walked him through my portfolio, and his eyes kind of glazed over. And he said, look, the honest answer is I don't understand a word of this. Would you like to come and work for me?
So how did you end up joining Sony then? How do you go from Mindscape and Sony in the at this point would be the pre-PlayStation days.
Yes, in fact, the time was a really interesting one in the history of PlayStation and Sony, because the relationship, I mean, this is well covered in the lore of the games industry, but the relationship between Sony and Nintendo to build the original PlayStation had just broken down. And so they were right at the beginning of thinking about how to build their own business as their own operator in the games industry, as their own platform. And so I got a call from a friend who had moved over to Sony in the US. And I got a call from a guy called Olaf Olofsson, who was running the electronic publishing business for Sony out of the US. And I met him at some ungodly hour of the morning at Heathrow Airport. It was the only time we could meet.
At the airport?
Yeah, it was a bizarre interview.
Were you flying anywhere?
No, he was flying somewhere.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
And so I get a call from his assistant like the day before saying, Mr. Olofsson will be at Heathrow Airport at like 6:20 tomorrow morning.
Wow.
Please meet him there. And I'm like, okay. By 7 o'clock, I had a job.
All right, so the CD-ROM add-on that Sony was going to make for Nintendo, were you involved in that at all?
No, I was not. And that was the project that had just finished before I joined the company. And it finished in rather acrimonious circumstances.
I remember reading about it, yeah.
And the vision was, the plan was that Sony would make a combined unit, which was a Super Nintendo and a CD drive mixed together.
Yeah.
Sony already made the sound chip for the Super Nintendo, so that was the thing that created the relationship. In fact, Mr. Kutaragi, who founded PlayStation, was the engineer responsible for the sound chip. So that was the kind of thread in history. And then Nintendo would make a standalone drive with supply components by Sony. And then at the very last minute, for very complex business reasons, the project was abandoned. And it was quite embarrassing for Sony at the time. And the team was given the permission to go and build a competing platform. And so I joined right at the perfect timing. I mean, it was not luck. I mean, it wasn't planned. It was complete luck.
Do you ever stop and think, was that dissolving of that partnership the best thing that ever happened to your career, in a way?
Yes, almost certainly, but actually more importantly than my career, nobody should really care about my career.
Well, I care, that's why you're here.
Oh, bless you. But I think actually it was the best thing that ever happened for the industry, because it stimulated a huge amount of creativity and innovation at the developer level and at the publisher level and at the economic level.
Sure.
And it transitioned an industry that was doing great but wasn't going to become a mass market business. And the decisions to add a disk drive, put so much value back into the development community.
Right,
because the cost
off the cartridge.
Exactly, yeah. You know, some of the projects that I was involved with at Mindscape, the physical cartridge cost $15 a unit.
Wow.
And if you make a mistake ordering too many, you are dead. And if you order too few, it took too long to replenish supply.
You're at Sony. You had quite the rise up the company ladder, which we'll get more into. You've been involved in every Sony hardware launch up through the PS3.
Yep.
So I'm just curious now, you know, you've got 10 plus years to look back on it. What was there any that was your favorite, any launch that you remember like, man, that one was particularly fun or interesting in some way?
I think obviously because it was pioneering and breaking new ground, PlayStation 1 was the thing that I look back on with most fondness, partly because of the product that we were building, but also partly because of the team that we were constructing. And I've told this story before, but the moment when I went to Namco prior to the launch of PS1 and saw Ridge Racer up and running, you know, that was like actually I think we're onto something here. And at that very same meeting, they said, because that bit of the demo had gone so well, they said, we're working on something else. Would you like to come and have a look? And we're like, sure, sounds great. And it was Tekken. So, you know, seeing those two games within an hour of each other for the first time was pretty exciting.
With regard to the PS3, now that was sort of has been looked at by some. You may not feel this way, but as sort of Sony's little hubris going on. What did you guys have any idea that people were going to latch on to the the $599 thing and the giant enemy crab for massive? Like, did that whole unveil, like, did it catch you off guard after the PlayStation 3 reveal?
Yeah, so I think there was two moments. I think the 2005 E3 where we showed the platform promise got everybody very, very excited.
Yeah.
And then once the reality hit home of just how expensive it was going to be, and I think some of the reaction from the audience was justifiably concerned, and it also coincided with the rise of the internet as a platform for users to really express their opinions. And I think in some ways it caught many companies, not just us, off guard.
Sure.
The balance of power had shifted a little bit, and we had to invest way more in understanding our users and their passions.
Was there any internal concern or debate about that $599 price point? I mean, yes, there was a $499 model, I think, too. But what was it the 20 gig hard drive, or I don't remember which one it was.
Yeah, no, it was. You're right. It was the 20.
But you could barely, like, it was not the one that was really marketed or pushed as I recall it. But was that $600? Was that a worry internally at all?
It was a worry because $600 was actually too cheap because the machine was so expensive to make.
Yeah.
And this is normal in a console business, that the first few 100,000 machines you make cost a ton,
right?
And then you quickly come down the cost curve,
yeah.
and you get into profit later. But the first machines of PS3 were way more expensive than the $599 retail price that we charged.
Now I'm curious what the actual figure was.
Oh, I'm not sure it's public information, and I probably shouldn't share it.
Fair enough.
But it would make your eyebrows shoot clear off the top of your head.
All right then. The PS3, was it a year late? That was always sort of the story. Was it supposed to launch alongside around the same time as the 360 in fall of 2005? I don't know if that's a real story or just an urban legend.
I think we always said winter, and the good news is that winter in the northern hemisphere is a sort of fairly broad spread. I honestly can't remember. Yes, it was later than I think we would have wished for.
Yeah.
And the thing that actually slowed down the production on the hardware was down to a tiny component. It was the laser diode on the Blu-ray drive.
Really?
Yeah, it was like a 5-cent component.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And was it a volume thing? Like, yeah. So because, like, I know, Elon Musk talks about this with Tesla, is the assembly line can only move as fast as the slowest part.
Right. And
right? So it's the same thing in a console.
Yeah. In this particular case, the shift from red laser to blue laser was actually quite a sophisticated change in the way that the optical head on a drive worked, and it was a little bit of physics and a little bit of chemistry mixed together because it's really a crystal that you're making.
Nice.
And they just couldn't make enough.
Huh. How was Microsoft and the Xbox looked at from within Sony? It's been known now. The executives, past and present, have told the story of, well, yeah, we were going after Sony. We wanted to try and get into that living room. So how did you guys at the time look at the original Xbox?
So it depends on where you sat around the boardroom table in Japan. Literally.
Really?
It depended on where you sat. Because if you were on the European or the US side of the boardroom table,
yeah.
you'd be like, yeah, Microsoft is deadly serious and we have to be on our best game to compete. Either the other end of the boardroom table, more Japanese side, were like, Xbox in Japan? No, it's nothing.
And both were right.
Correct. And so, that's exactly right. And so as a result, there was a very spirited set of conversations that would go on. And obviously Xbox became a phenomenal competitor and contributor to the industry. So it was correct.
I don't know if this is something, if like I'm just projecting this as a fan and you don't look at it this way, but did it feel weird at all, kind of crossing over to the, signing with the other team, as it were? Or is that just something that like gamers think about, but you're just like, well, no, it's a career move. That's
I didn't really think of it as a career move. It was really the things that drive me are, can I make a difference? Can I work with people I love and respect and care about? And can we move the needle forward? Can we move the industry forward? And so those were the things that I was thinking about. I'm well aware that there was a lot of memes around, me being some kind of spy on the inside, which was quite funny to a few of us at times. But yeah, that's just great fandom, I guess, in the industry.
So you were at Microsoft from kind of the tail end of 360 to the early Xbox One era. Fable Legends, real quick. That I'm a longtime Fable fan. That game kind of broke my heart because I didn't like it, and it ultimately led to the destruction of that studio. Now, you may disagree with me on sort of the cause correlations of that, but was Fable Legends a mistake, do you think, in hindsight? Would a more traditional Fable sequel have been a better way to go?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, hindsight is 20/20 vision, and I'm not going to make any kind of flippant remark about any time where a studio gets closed and people lose their jobs.
Yeah.
Because it's a terrible moment.
It's horrible.
In regardless of whether you're a fan of the games or the studio, just anybody who would be out of work as a result of a corporate decision, which obviously was made long after I left. I think where Fable Legends had the best of intentions was to create an ongoing service experience where you could create an experience that would then grow with players and
almost a little before its time.
Maybe. And I think that there are other examples that are doing it better now that maybe would have been more effective proxies or examples. But also the studio was not really in the right place at that time to go build a very, very rich single-player RPG.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure it had a huge number of other options in front of it.
Yeah, fair enough. What were the differences between Sony and Microsoft in your experience? As game companies, you sat pretty high up at both. What were sort of would you think of any kind of key differences or even similarities between the two?
The food wasn't as good when I went to Redmond as it was going to Japan. That would be one difference. I love Japanese food, so that's slightly an unfair statement. I think one of the things that was very obvious to me early, actually even before joining Microsoft, is that say what you like about the company, but the people at the top of Xbox all play games and all love games.
Yeah.
And so that was clear. You would come in on a Monday morning, and there would be a conversation, around the meeting room table about the experience that people had had playing together on Sunday night.
Yeah.
And I thought that was fantastic, and it was top to bottom. And I think Phil Spencer, in particular, was driving that, but it was across the company. There was a passion for the culture of games and what that could mean for the world.
How do you think Sony has been doing this generation? What do you see from them now as an outsider? And Microsoft too, I'm curious.
I think they're both doing great. I mean, I think that Sony, from a pure business point of view, has done phenomenally well with PlayStation 4. It's great to see some of the success of their internal studios products and experiences that I may have had an early hand in come to life, which is fun. I think what Xbox is doing with the shift to thinking about creating value in a subscription is interesting. And so everyone's innovating. Everyone's trying to lift the industry, which is great. Nobody's resting on their laurels. Nobody's sat there thinking, I'll just wait this out and wait for the next generation to come along.
Well, as you heard, Phil Harrison has had quite the career in games. He's been at Sony, he's been at Microsoft, he's been at Atari, now he's at Google, heading up all things Stadia. For more on that, check out part 2 of my interview with Phil, where I talk to him about all things Stadia and how it may factor in heavily into the future of gaming. For more on that, stay tuned every month for new episodes of IGN Unfiltered.